Deliver Us from Evil isn't a new Netflix movie, but it is a new movie to Netflix. The supernatural crime thriller stars Eric Bana, Sean Harris, Edgar Ramirez, and Joel McHale. So is this story of possible possessions be a great watch for spooky season? New York police officer Ralph Sarchie investigates a series of crimes. He joins forces with an unconventional priest schooled in the rites of exorcism to combat the possessions that are terrorizing their city. So this is based on the accounts of real people. Ralph Sarchie and Father Mendoza worked together, but this tells the story of how they met and then the evil that they faced. Now, I'm sure some of this has been over-dramatized for the movie, but since I haven't read the book that this is based on, I can't tell for certain what's exaggerated and what really happened. Now, the film starts off with some soldiers in Iraq encountering this cave or bunker-like hole in the ground while they're patrolling. Now, inside, we're barely shown what happens, but we hear it all, and it is a harrowing amount of screaming and shouting that's just coming from these hardened soldiers. And then the story flashes forward some years to Sarchie as he's investigating some cases that begin to have a tie. A mysterious shrouded guy is seemingly present in some horrific scenarios, one involving domestic abuse and one involving a mom at a zoo. Now, Sarchie thinks the mom is nuts because of her actions, but he then meets Mendoza, who has other beliefs on why she did what she did. The story's a tense one. I mean, not only because of the possession aspect that comes into play, but also thanks to the inherent urgency that's contained with this unknown madman roaming free in the city. The pacing is mostly quick, with energetic and harried scenes that are filled with foot pursuits and street fights as the cops take on some bad guys. But there are moments, too, that the narrative isn't propelling us forward quickly. We have times when characters, they're just getting meaningful development and depth in ways that don't feel like the story has stopped down for a bunch of exposition. Now, these come about naturally, and they fit within their place in the progression. If the movie had killed its momentum to give us insight into the main characters, especially halfway through the movie, it would have broken me completely out. But instead, we get a natural flow of relationship building that then culminates in personal stories being shared that work to both humanize the characters, then also make them sympathetic. And I think this is especially important with Eric Bana's Sarchie. Throughout so much of this movie, he's a jaded and very gruff person, even with his family. The pressures and darkness that come about because of his job in cases, they take a toll. And while we might be able to root for him in the sense of justice, as a person, he's much harder to connect with. But once we get insight into his past and understand why he has this cloud over him, everything falls into place, which then allows for character growth that also doesn't feel like it's being forced into the story to just make him less of an a-hole. The movie, it's just under 2 hours. I didn't feel the time though in this. I think because there was such a great mix of suspenseful intrigue and then eerie supernatural elements, and that balance, it held my attention all the way through. The dynamics of the characters are also fun to watch. At the beginning of the story, we watch Bana and Joel McHale as police special ops partners, and they have this bro machismo aura to them. It's not off-putting, but it is a bit cringy, especially coming from McHale, who looks like he's trying a bit too hard to be the tough guy. I think a lot of that just comes from watching him on Community and The Soap, where he was certainly funny, but not what you'd consider the strong fighting type. But then, when the story transitions to the partnership between Bana and Ramirez, their relationship is completely different. Sometimes it's antagonistic, given the opposite sides of faith and belief that they approach cases from, but we also witness a mutual respect that forms, leading to that powerful conversation that I had mentioned earlier. Now, it was a bit odd that while Bana and Ramirez were forming a relationship on screen, McHale, he just kind of disappears from the narrative. I mean, he does pop back up for a great sequence towards the end, but I did find it somewhat strange to have the guy basically just absent from a portion of the story, especially since he'd been so much of a presence early on. In addition to the dynamic between Bana and Ramirez, one of the other highlights of the movie is that there are some brutal but spectacular practical effects that are vivid, grotesque, and often horrifying. And while I'm not sure I'd classify this movie as a horror, there are elements that would feel right at home within that genre. This plays out more like an intense thriller, but that doesn't take away from the distressing sights that we witness. There's also a wonderful use of subtle sounds, voices, even music that only certain characters can hear, leading to questions of sanity, reliability, even innocence. And this adds a disturbing layer of creepiness because we can't be certain if the characters are hearing it just because they're sensitive to it or if they're possibly possessed. I mean, this doubt, it complements the story well, and it continually feeds into the growing urgency and the danger that's present. Now, something else that helps to add to the overall aesthetic is the use of shadows. And while a lot of this takes place in the daylight, key moments involve areas that are hidden from natural light, like basements and dilapidated homes. When characters are in these places, there's typically just a flashlight beam to illuminate an area, which I think then enhances the fear, or maybe at least the danger, because the field of vision, it's reduced to something pretty narrow. I also love how shadows help to make certain aspects even more sinister and evil looking. There are at least 3 different characters who are having some serious body and soul issues, which is then affecting their outward appearance. But to make things even more unsettling, we can't fully see them a lot of the time. I mean, just a portion of the face, and maybe a hint of these blackened eyes that are peering at us. When this is then combined with the makeup and the practical effects, the whole thing is just wrong. As we reach the climax of the film, it builds in dread, peril, and stress. But the final moment is extremely abrupt and then awkward. We've got minutes and minutes of this type of showdown, only to have it resolved in a snap. I mean, I'm not sure what I was expecting to happen, but all the build-up seemed to be more important and impactful than how it ends. I'm not even saying that it wasn't satisfying. I was just startled at the suddenness of a particular action. Now, for the lore that the story rests on, I think it's pretty fascinating, and really could have used even more time exploring the origins. Now, I'm not sure it would make this movie any stronger, but the premise and the discovery of the core plot complication, I think it'd be fun to examine even more. Even how it is, though, we do get enough context for what certain visuals mean, and then the ramifications that they carry. We don't get an entire origin story about some carvings, but for this narrative, the movie doesn't require it to get to the point across. So overall, Deliver Us from Evil is a creepy thriller with outstanding practical effects, chilling sound design, characters that are wildly flawed but still redeemable, and a story that is tense, violent, and surprisingly engaging. The end is a bit abrupt, and some characters disappear from the narrative at odd times, but on the whole, this provides a lot of enjoyment thanks to stressful and urgent storytelling. There's no sex or nudity, a ton of profanity, and a lot of brutal violence. I give Deliver Us from Evil 4 out of 5 couches. So have you seen this one? If so, what'd you think? Now if you haven't, what's your favorite possession-themed movie that's not The Exorcist? Alright, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.